Several of you used made a reference to energy renaissance, natural gas renaissance, shale renaissance. Would we have had a renaissance? Would we have had this uptick in the economy, to use your terms, Mr. McGarvey, and we were in a depression effectively. Would we have had that if we had not had infrastructure in place to avail ourselves of the technology that allows us to go after this resource? This resource just didn't appear there overnight. It's been sitting there. It's been our ability to access it through the technologies that have come about. So it's a pretty generic question to you all, but it again speaks to the critical issue that we're talking about here, which is making sure that we have adequate capacity within our infrastructure. Mr. Black, can you speak to that? And Mr. Dr. Performic, can you, given the research that you have done at CRS, also speak to that? So Mr. Black first.
Well, thank you, Senator, for hitting the key point. You need pipeline infrastructure to make this happen. You discussed the importance of getting product from point A to point B, whether it's crude oil to refineries where it's lower costing, or natural gas liquids that get to a petrochemical plant. It wouldn't be possible without the pipeline infrastructure. It's absolutely necessary, and it wouldn't happen without it. Dr.
Performic?
There's no question that the unprecedented developments in shale gas, reducing the price of natural gas, from $15, if you remember, just a few years earlier, to the $2 to $3 to $4 range, created a host of economic benefits. It lowered home heating costs, so folks had more money to spend on discretionary expenditures. It lowered manufacturing costs, as others have stated in the past, made electricity cheaper. And so there were a host of benefits. Now, economics tells you supply and demand, cheap commodity, you're going to increase demand for it, and we have this sort of cyclical nature in the energy industry as we always have had. What is interesting to me as an analyst is that we are just, in my view, in the beginning of a huge transition infrastructure-wise from an economy where natural gas was produced in certain regions, consumed in certain regions, to physical reshuffling of that, as I stated in my testimony, and continued transition in the way that natural gas is being utilized. And so from my point of view, it sort of requires constant vigilance as to, how are things going regulatorily, construction-wise, the price of fuels, which are influenced not only by developments here, but internationally. And so it requires a lot of attention to all of these factors. And unfortunately, it's a lot more complicated than it used to be.
Let me ask about that, the fact that it is more complicated, because we speak about the benefits to consumers, whether it be lower energy costs. We certainly recognize the jobs benefit, just the overall benefit that comes to the broader economy as a whole. And yet we have this NIMBY attitude where, okay, I want to make sure that I have access to that natural gas. I want to make sure that I have access to this resource. But just don't put it within my eyesight. Don't put it in my state. Put it in somebody else's. If the benefits are so apparent, and again, I'll look at you, Mr. McGarvey, because I think from a jobs perspective, it's just bold and in your face. Why is there this disconnect? I think I called it a cognitive dissonance here. What are we not doing right in conveying to the American public, the consumer, that there is clear benefit here? And oh, by the way, if you want to have more affordable, accessible, clean, diverse, secure supplies, you're going to need the infrastructure. What are we doing wrong? Are we not conveying to the workforce the importance of this?
My workforce understands the importance of this.
Go ahead and hit.
My workforce understands the importance of it for sure. It's just ironic that, again, it goes back to our discourse. We can't have an honest conversation where, in a region or in a local area, we have to have outside groups come in and gin up with scare tactics and other things, why people should be frightened and opposed. I mean, it's gotten so bad that, ironically, even in the state of Vermont, I think in its last legislative session, I think the Vermont Senate passed a bill, I don't know that it's made it all the way through, to ban or put a moratorium on more windmills in the state of Vermont. We've already closed, our nuclear plant up there. I don't know how they're going to do their power generation, but again, if we could have a rational conversation about the benefits, about not ceding our position as the economic superpower to China, about real middle-class jobs, family-sustaining middle-class jobs and what they mean. And for the most part, there's always exceptions to the rules, but for the most part, a private investment wants to work with local communities to make it work for them so that it works for all the parties that are involved with it. And that, in my testimony, I talked about that three-legged stool: government, labor, and industry all working together to make sure that we're building safe infrastructure. It's aesthetically pleasing as it can be, as far away from inhabited home sites as it can be, and keeps the country moving forward. It goes back to everything else that's going on in our country right now. There's just not, we can't have an honest conversation about what's important.
And I would like to think that here at the committee we can help move forward honest conversation. So thank you for bringing that up.